Cyrus.
Yes. I'm Cyrus Das from Malaysia. I was the CLA President from 1999 to 2003. And, well, as you know, these conferences are held once in 2 years.
Yeah. Okay, sir.
I'm Ron Heinrich from Sydney, Australia, and I was President from 2008 to 2010.
And I'm Boma Uzobia from Nigeria. I was President from 2011 to 2013.
Graham Mew, originally from London, but more recently from Toronto, Canada. I was President from 2005 to 2007.
Colin Nichols QC from London. I was President between 2003 and 2005. I was made an honorary life President in 2007. I have been an officer of the association for just on 30 years, since 1986. My first conference was in 1983.
Mohammed Hussain from South Africa. I was president of the CLA between 2010 and 2011 and joined the organisation in 1998 as a councillor.
Okay, this is a question to any and all of you. We're nearly at the end of this conference here in Glasgow. The sun is coming out for the first time. What have we achieved?
I think we've achieved what we always achieve. People who come to this conference for the first time are surprised by how the dialogue, we all speak the same language with different accents, and the thing that makes these conferences, in my view, better than any of the other international legal conferences is that we have that shared legal heritage, with a few twists obviously from South Africa and Scotland, but we essentially we have common issues, common problems, but different ways of coming at them, and the quality of the dialogue is fantastic, both inside and outside. I think that's what sets these conferences apart from all others.
Yes, it's extraordinary, isn't it? The common law has moved from England, as you say, with influences from civil law in Scotland and in South Africa, but it's spread right around the Commonwealth, and that's what unites everybody.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yeah, we all have a common heritage in the common law, and that's very important. And I think the real thing about this conference is that the principal purpose is to reinforce the rule of law and to discuss the common law in its application to the rule of law.
Very true, and also upholding standards in the profession. Besides the conference, one of the things we do is report on what is going on in our jurisdictions, and where necessary, look at how to assist each other to maintain the rule of law in our jurisdictions and standards in the profession.
That's right, isn't
Yes.
it? We can all learn from one another.
Right. You know, Joshua, every conference is structured with at least about 8 to 12 streams. But in every conference, there will be one stream on constitutionalism and rule of law. And one of the great things that we learn is that the experiences of the other countries in respect of rule of law, the challenges they face to rule of law. We had a very interesting session yesterday afternoon where Jeffrey Robertson spoke on what happened or what's happening in Bangladesh over their so-called International Crimes Tribunal, which isn't really much international, and the death sentences that have been passed out. So at this conference, you learn about what has happened in Bangladesh. And so likewise, at every conference, you learn about rule of law challenges in the various countries. We have problems in Malaysia on speech, and that was articulated at a session on the first day.
And what can the Commonwealth Lawyers Association do about countries where the rule of law is under threat, Colin?
We make statements, we make interventions. Most significant of those, which you reported when you were a reporter, when you were correspondent for the Telegraph, our intervention in the Guantanamo Bay hearings in the United States Supreme Court, which was one of our great moments. May I just say this, what is unique about these conferences, and they've been going since 1955, what is unique is they're a conference of the legal profession in its broadest sense. It is an occasion when judges, practitioners, government and private practitioners, and academics can meet to discuss these issues. I don't know of any other conference where that occurs. And so the great thing is when we come to these conferences, and what I take away from these conferences is meeting fellow professionals and the judges on an equal basis, discussing these issues.
In terms of what we can do to assist other Commonwealth jurisdictions, I look at what we did in South Africa during the anti-apartheid struggle. Essentially, we used law as a terrain of struggle, and I think that is something that is a lesson and could be applied elsewhere. There are jurisdictions where you have simply no choice but for lawyers to become activists and to use all fronts to help to organize, mobilize communities to go against the governments wherever the rule of law is a threat. So, and it's to support all of those lawyers, as we've done in Bangladesh, many other jurisdictions. And I think that's the key. Despite having this common heritage, and despite always respecting hallowed principles like independence of the judiciary and so on, we know that people within the Commonwealth have different experiences of those. And the idea is to support jurisdictions where the rule of law is under threat.
I think
Whilst all our lawyers are different in jurisdictions, we've got great commonality, and that's because of the common law. And we all understand about the rule of law, and as Mohammed was saying, we assist those jurisdictions that are under threat in respect to the rule of law. And we've had, the example in Fiji, and we've had Zimbabwe and Pakistan, and all of those jurisdictions when they've been under threat. One of the things we do is support the individual lawyers, particularly the ones at personal risk. We actually bring that out into the open, that these people have been threatened physically and worse, and we make statements about it, and we endeavour to protect them by lending our support to them.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, Ron brought up the example of Fiji, of Pakistan, Zimbabwe. We've often done a session at the conferences called Lawyers on the Front Line, where we've had lawyers who are facing those sort of adversities, and we talk about the common law, but the common law is sometimes used as a vehicle to abuse power, and where there are judiciaries that are less than independent. And as Ron says, it's more than just moral support. We have made representations to the government. I think on occasions we have been able to be agents of change and bring about a realisation, raise government awareness at a Commonwealth heads of government level. Coming from Canada, our government decided not to go to send the leader of our government to the Commonwealth heads of government meeting in Sri Lanka because of the circumstances involving the Chief Justice there. So by those sorts of interventions and representations, we can fight well above our weight as an organisation and influence people.
Are you willing now?
Yes, I think that we, apart from the other organisations, I think the only ones that interface at the level of senior officers and law ministers, the solemn meetings that occur in Chogam. So we're able to
Commonwealth heads of government meeting.
Correct, yes, and put papers before the Commonwealth heads of government in relation to rule of law issues. And I think that sets us apart from other international organisations.
I find it certainly a very great privilege that through the CLA I have been able to, last year, present the Commonwealth report, working group report on cybercrime to law ministers in Botswana, and that report was adopted. I'm continuing to do that sort of work. But when we talk in terms of change, the intervention we made in the Guantanamo Bay hearing in the Supreme Court really had an argument which was decisive in Justice Stephen's judgment. And similarly, we intervene in the use of evidence obtained by torture in the House of Lords. Again, where we look to play an important part.
Yeah.
And I can almost hear a managing partner saying, why send a lawyer to the CLC and not a donation? And the answer to that would be, it's great networking. It's a place where we meet senior lawyers who are specialists in all different areas of practice, and it's not as big as some of the other law conferences, so you have time to engage, and in those 4 days we get to know ourselves and pretty well.
And one important thing which comes out of BOMA is it's not what we can get out of the conference, it's what we can contribute to the conference.
And to the CLA as a whole.
And to the CLA as a whole. And I think that is the significant difference between the CLA conferences and the IBA, the ABA and the Canadian Bar Association conferences.
But the great thing is you can eat your cake and have it.
Well, there is no doubt.
Yes,
there's no doubt.
absolutely.
And the great privilege is you meet the best in the profession throughout the Commonwealth. I mean, you meet your real leaders.
Sorry?
I think one important thing that should be mentioned is this. We also attempt to set standards. In June 1998, we participated with the other Commonwealth auxiliaries and came out with an important document called the Latimer House Guidelines on the relationship between the three branches of government. And that was meant to be a benchmark or a standard. So whether you're the new Commonwealth or the old Commonwealth, all judiciaries are meant to aspire towards meeting those standards. And this afternoon we have a very important session just to monitor and audit how after 15 or 17 years it has been progressing and whether it has been adopted. Colin has played a very important role in pushing it for adoption at the law ministers' meetings of the Commonwealth countries. It has also been adopted by CHOGM. But the problem always is how much of adherence is made to it. And our biggest fear, and that's why we have a session at every conference auditing the progress of the Latimer House, our biggest fear is sometimes subscriptions made to it by pure lip service.
Yes,
when it comes to the real thing,
yes.
it doesn't quite.
So is that the main challenge ahead, to make sure that people keep to what they say, keep to their commitments, and
Absolutely.
people keep joining you? And
We are very concerned with the implementation of these principles, such as the Latimer House Guidelines, and that indeed was a major feature in the Law Ministers' meeting in May last year. It took us 5 years to get the Latimer House Guidelines adopted by heads of government as the Latimer House principles. It was a very hard struggle. 2 years later, without any effort on our part, those principles were raised to part of the fundamental values of the Commonwealth. As I say, the fight is invariably hard, but is very worthwhile, and we can be very gratified about how it has worked out.
But we need to keep reinforcing it.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to, every conference we come back to it.
The reality is that governments, Commonwealth governments in particular, and their judiciaries, I think, precisely, don't like to be audited. And this conference does that. This conference does that. At the various sessions, you have participation from the floor, and on any given topic, you'll have people coming up from different countries and saying what's the problem that they have. And so we learn about it, and it's a good experience in that way.
what will you take away from this conference then?
It will be the immediacy and the complexity of the issues which we have had to address in these sessions, and the competence and skill of the speakers, and indeed those who have asked questions from the audience. That, I think, is very valuable indeed. These aren't idle sessions. And time and again, this time, and I've heard more of it this time than ever before, I have heard people say, what the CLA should do is this, time and again. And we can therefore take away a lot of those issues, and we will have an agenda for the next 2 years.
We always learn something.
Yeah. I think what I will take away is that constant vigilance is required. Countries claim to adopt human rights principles, conventions, but in their application they don't meet the test. And I think we need a constant reminder from many Commonwealth countries and from our friends out there and colleagues that unless we're going to maintain vigilance and actually up our game, I think the rule of law and human rights are threatened in many, many Commonwealth jurisdictions.
One of the things that always strikes me about these conferences, most of us are actually commercial lawyers. Collins is a human rights lawyer, but most of us come from backgrounds that you wouldn't necessarily associate with these dialogues on the rule of law. And it's part of that, it actually sort of validates, it gives you an opportunity to take a step back and think about what we do and why we do it and what role we play in the broader system. And I take that away not just from this conference, but from every conference I've been to.